Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the video series from zero to continuous delivery. This is part two slash part one. The first video in the series was more of an introduction to talk about the tools that we're going to use and exactly what the series is going to be about. So this is kind of the first video where we're going to be doing stuff together. So thanks for joining. A little bit of housekeeping up front before we get to it. Everything that we write today is going to be up on my GitHub, which is posted in the description below. So if you want to look at that to follow along, or you need to look up links later to see sort of the code that I was writing here, maybe I go through it a little bit too quickly for you, feel free to check that out. Again, there was a video prior to this one, so feel free to check it out here to see the intro to the series, or start with us on this video. Doesn't matter. Okay, so in this video, we are going to scaffold up a web app. We're going to put together a application with very little work on our side, actually, using SailsJS, which is a JavaScript framework that's a full stack framework. It's MVC, which stands for Model View Controller. It's a design pattern in software development. I'll post a link to those topics below. And Sales is a well-known framework, and we're going to use it to scaffold up an app quickly. We're going to use their template for us, so we won't have to do a whole lot of configuration. We'll get it running, and we'll be off. We'll source control it, and then in the next video, we should deploy it to the cloud. All right, so without further ado, let's get to it. First, we got to resize the window. Pew. Okay. There we go. Can you guys see me? Great. All right, so first things first. We need to install Sales. So in the last video, we made sure that we had Node. So in this video, we're going to start off by using our npm Node Package Manager to install a couple of things. So first thing is, let's make a folder where we want to put all of our code. So I'm just going to make a folder. I'm going to change into my code directory. And apparently I don't have one. Add it in my documents. All right, so first thing we're going to do is make a folder for our code. So I'm going to do mkdir for make directory. We'll call this one sales sample app. Okay, so if I ls, I should see a sales sample app folder. So let's just go ahead and go in there. All right, so now we're in there. And we're going to, what we wanted to do is use Sales's, that's an interesting word. We want to use Sales's template scaffold tool. And that's pretty simple. You just use a command from Sales, but we'll get to that in a minute. So first thing we're going to do is install Sales. So we're going to do npm install, and we're going to install it globally. So we're going to do -g sales. So what that should do is reach out to the npm server and fetch all of the different dependencies that the sales package needs to operate. And we can see that it added 247 packages. So then let's just use that simple command that Sales provides us. And so once we've ensured that npm installed it successfully, we're going to do sales new. That's it. It'll ask us, do we want it to be a kind of a full fleshed out web app template, or do we want it to be an empty application that's kind of a little bit more raw? For the purposes of this series, we're going to focus a little bit less on the intricacies of how the web app actually works. I'll include documentation below for how Sales does their MVC pattern. It's very opinionated, similar to Ruby on Rails, if you're familiar with that pattern, or Spring MVC, pretty much any MVC framework, .NET MVC. They all have similar opinions on what files need to go where, what they're going to be called, etc. So Sales is just another one of those frameworks. We don't need to go into a whole Sales tutorial, but it's helpful to know that it's doing a lot for us behind the scenes. So without further ado, let's do 1. So type 1 and hit enter. And depending on your version of Git Bash, or if you're using Mac or Linux, depending on the terminal that you use, sometimes the prompt will freeze. So we're going to let this install for a minute, and then if it doesn't finish, then I'm going to skip ahead to something in a minute. So, okay, yeah. So I had to Control C out of my window because it was done, but it was hanging for me. So it might not hang for you, but if it does, go ahead and Control C once it's been sitting there for a few seconds and it says info created sample sales app. And we can verify that it generated stuff for us by looking at the file tree, type in ls. We can see, let's do an ls-al. We can see that we've got all these additional folders now in here in this folder we just made. And these are all the files and folders needed to run the sample app that Sales has generated for us. And we can run that right now and take a peek at what that application looks like. And so to do that, we can quickly type in sales lift, which is really shorthand for a couple of other commands that we can talk about later. So just type sales lift, and what that's going to do is it's going to run a few npm scripts behind the scenes and a node script. So it will start up a node express server for us, and it's going to do some hooks that are specific to sales to sort of get that MVC framework in place. And now it's serving the web app for us at localhost port 1337. So let's go ahead and go to localhost 1337, and we should see a couple of things. We should see the app, first of all, here with a floating sailboat amongst the clouds. We should see also a log down here in the bottom right that tells us that someone requested a page. We can see that it was a GET request on the / route, and we can do some other things. We can try signing up. You can see down here when I click sign up, we got a new request at the /signup route, and they tell you what view is rendered, and we'll look at that in a second briefly. And yeah, so you can see that we've now got a functioning scaffolded sales application up and running on our local host. All right, so now to actually look at the code that was generated, we're going to use Sublime. So I'm going to do Sublime, open folder, and I'm going to find the folder that all this code is in, sales sample app, and I will select that folder, open it up. So now we can see all of the different folders that were generated and the files that are relevant for sales. Yeah, so let's take a look at the homepage file. So it's going to be in the views section. We can see that the first route down here, the / rendered the pages / homepage. So we can go down to views, pages, and then we can see that here there's a file called homepage.ejs. And this doesn't look very pleasant. It doesn't seem to know how to parse this. So if you look down on the bottom right, you can see in small letters that it says this is a plain text file. Well, that is not true. This is a embedded JavaScript file. That's .ejs. So normally in Sublime, you can click on it on the word that tells you what file type it is, and you can choose what file type you want it to be rendered as. But we don't see an EJS embedded JavaScript entry in here. That's because it's not a default included file format. So what we're going to do is install an EJS plugin to Sublime. So we do that. We just go to preferences, package control, and we are going to install a package. The package we want is called EJS. I believe it's EJS 2. That should be all we need to do. After we've clicked that, it should be installing. We should see it here. Yep, there it is. So now we can go back to the EJS file, and we can go down to the bottom right, click plain text, and then change it to EJS. Now it's asking us what template and what embedded syntax are we going to be using. And from what I've seen, Sales uses the %, though you can use many different embedded symbols. So things between the brackets and the percents are going to be rendered server side before they're sent to the client. So go ahead and click the %sign one. We'll change it if we need to later. And this looks much nicer. Looks much more how we would expect the code to look. Looks like mostly an HTML page with maybe some JavaScript embedded somewhere. Like down here at the bottom, we've got this rendered function that it invokes here, which is going to be invoked server side. Okay, so we've got an app running locally that you can play with and edit all you want. But before we start making changes to it, we should set up a Git repository to track those changes so that we can always revert back to a point in time as we kind of make checkpoints. So I'm going to go ahead and Control C this to stop the application. And let's make a GitHub repo quickly. So I will do a git initialization here. So git init. Just going to make a git repo in the folder. Then I'm going to make sure, let's see what the status is. So nothing's in there yet. So let's go ahead and add everything to the commit to be staged. Git status, everything is staged. So we're going to do our first commit, initial commit. Okay, so I ran into a problem. So if you haven't installed Git on your system yet, then you're likely going to see this as well. It's going to ask you to set up your identity. So the commit didn't succeed because it didn't have an email or a username to attach. So I'm going to go ahead and attach that. So all I got to do is follow the instructions here. So we're going to do a git config, set the global user email, kevinellisdev@gmail.com. Same thing with the username. This is going to be used by Git when it makes the commits to sort of stamp who wrote the commit. All right, so we've got the Git configuration set up. So let's try this again. Let's go back and do a commit. Great, bunch of creates on the files. Should do git status, nothing to commit. If we do a git log, we should see our first commit. And we've got a timestamp. Hooray! And depending on what terminal or shell you're using, Git Bash has the nice feature to tell you what branch you are using. All right, so we've got a GitHub repository locally initialized, but we need some place to store it off our computer for security. We're going to go ahead and use GitHub. So let's open up our GitHub account and make sure that we've got a place to put the code. So open GitHub, we're going to do a new repository. Let's name this Sales Sample App. Description. Web app using SailsJS. Leave this public so everyone can look at it. And we don't want to initialize it with anything. That's because our sales scaffold tool gave us all this stuff. And if we initialize it with something here, it's going to make an extra commit, which will be a little bit annoying to deal with commit resolution. So it's easier if you just don't add anything here and just hit create, which will make an empty repository for us. And helpfully, it now tells us how we can sort of connect these two dots, how we can take it from the GitHub repository to our local repository and make sure that they're on the same page. So we are going to follow their instructions pretty closely here. But there's going to be something that you'll probably have to do if you haven't used Git on your machine before, and that is make an SSH key. But we'll get there in a moment. So if we look at these instructions, we can see we've already done kind of the first 2, 3-ish. You know, we've done our first commit. We've initialized the repo. So this one is where it's setting the main branch of the repository to main. So we can go ahead and do that as well. Main is the new master, 2020. Okay, so this is where we connect the dots. We take this command here and we're going to set our remote. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. We're going to add a remote endpoint called origin, and we're going to set it to the GitHub URL of this. Should be insert. There we go. So now if you have not used GitHub before, this next command will fail. But what we're going to do is we're going to we're going to set the upstream to track the origin main branch. So that's what -u does, git push -u origin main, and it should do fine if you've used GitHub before. Now, if you haven't, it will likely tell you that you don't have permissions to do this. So I'll just go through that briefly. The way that your computer authenticates with GitHub is through, now it actually depends based on how we are checking the repository out. So you'll see on my screen up here, we have SSH selected. You could also choose HTTPS, which is more username and password focused. It's a little bit more secure to use SSH. So again, that being said, the way that GitHub and your computer authenticate with each other is using SSH. That requires that your computer and GitHub both have a public and private key combination so that they can shake hands successfully and you can prove that you are who you say you are. So what you need to do if you haven't done this already is go to your settings page on GitHub and go to SSH and GPG keys, and you're going to click new SSH key. Now, here, all you have to do is paste in the key and give it a little title. Now, the key comes from when you do SSH keygen in your terminal. This will work in Git Bash, in Mac, Linux, whatever. Do SSH keygen. I recommend doing -t ed25519. That is a topic for another video, but it's one of the most secure ciphers for SSH keys right now. It's a elastic curve discrete logarithm problem, which is different than RSA keys, which rely on prime numbers being multiplied together, making these enormous numbers. Long story short, this is more secure. So go ahead and do -t to set the type to this particular type of security. Hit enter, and it will ask you where you want to save it. Go ahead and I just leave this as the default name. It's asking me if I want to overwrite it, which I do not because I already have one, but it probably will not say that. So just give it, let it be the default. It'll ask you if you want to do if you want to give it a passcode. I wouldn't. You're on your computer. As long as you're the only one with access to your computer, don't worry about adding a passcode. Just hit enter, and it should go ahead and save. Now, we can verify that it's saved by doing a quick ls on ~/.sh/. So that's going to list out everything in that folder. And we can see that I've got several keys here, but you should now see that you have some new keys there. Now, what we want to do is we need to get the public key from what your keygen just made and paste it into GitHub. So if you type cat and do your ID, and then make sure you do your public key here, but type your ID and then whatever. For me, it's 25519. Am I doing something wrong here? Oh yeah, I'm not in the right folder, so got to do it this way. ID ed.pub. Okay, so this is harmless that you all see this as well. The public key is fine for anyone to see. The private key is what needs to stay private. So you're going to cat out your pub key. You're going to copy this. You're going to paste it into here, just like that, including everything starting at SSH-ed all the way to the name of your computer. Give it a name, and then add the key. As soon as you add the key to your account, go back and try doing a push to origin again, and it will succeed now. Okay, last thing for this video. We've got a repo set up. We have a web app scaffolded out that does nothing right now other than a sample sales app. I encourage you to take a peek around the files and just see what's in there, try and make sense of it, maybe make some changes, make some commits. We're going to do one commit together here just to sort of show you how we can do that and how we can store those changes using Git. So we're just going to add a weather widget. So let's go back to our home page here. So let's run the app again. So let's make sure we're in our directory. Yes, we are. So I'm going to do sales lift. Again, that's going to run a couple of npm scripts behind the scenes. You may have heard like npm start for some of the other like single page application frameworks like React or Angular. It's more complex when you're running a full stack here. So that's why it has kind of a combined script for us to run. Okay, so we've got the app running. Let's go ahead and localhost 1337 elite. There it is. So let's just add a little weather widget below the sailboat, and then we'll track that change. I'm going to do another window of Git Bash so that we can see the server logs while we edit the files. Okay. So I'm going to real quick change directory into my documents, code, sample. No, what is it? Sales sample app? Cool. All right. And let's do a git status. Make sure nothing is sitting there changed. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Git status. Branch is up to date. Great. Okay, so I'm just going to Google weather widgets. Yeah, this one's a little bit simpler. It gets a little hairy when you embed JavaScript into an EJS file. So we're just going to do some pure HTML ones. So yeah, I am in Las Vegas, so I'm just gonna copy this code here, which is an anchor tag. We're just gonna paste this right into our homepage, and we'll see what it does. So this, we want to have it go right below the sailboat. So the sailboat is, let's see, let's inspect this guy. So it's inside of a div. That's oh, it's a container. That's nice. Well named. So here is the container, I think. Here we go. Here's the container div that holds the ship. So let's just go ahead and collapse that guy. All right. So right below it, we will add, we're just going to go ahead and paste the tag that we just saw from the widget website. We can refresh. And we see a poorly formatted, off-centered weather widget. But hey, it's there. So let's go ahead and save that change. We can do a git status and see, yes, there is something that's been changed. It tells us what it is. We're going to add that file to get staged. I'll be explicit here. Instead of using the .wildcard, I'll just do the file name exactly. You can use tab to autocomplete files if you did not know that. All right, so we have a file ready to be committed. We're going to commit it with a message. Add a poorly formatted weather widget to our homepage. So we're going to commit that with a message. We're then going to push main. We don't need to do -u anymore. We've already set the upstream branch, so we actually don't need to do anything besides type git push. That's what the -u did for us. If we didn't do -u, we would actually have to continue typing git push origin main. So, time savers. We're all about saving time here in computer science industry. All right, so let's just take a quick peek at the repository and make sure that the changes were pushed. Sales sample app. And we can see that the most recent commit message has add a poorly formatted weather widget to our homepage. And we can see some good info here. The README that was generated for us talks a little bit about the different pieces of a sales application. So feel free to dive into those. They're really helpful if you want to sort of flesh out your application. And this is where I think if you're trying to make a application in earnest, then kind of take a pause from this series and have fun with this. Go to town, learn about it, and make this app into whatever you at least want it to start as before continuing on in the series. Because the focus of this is sort of a higher level vision of how we can go from nothing all the way to having some continuous integration using some pipeline tools and cloud tools. So we are going to stop with our app updating at this point, but feel free to keep going as long as you'd like. Thanks everyone for watching. The next video in the series is going to be deploying this application in AWS. So we're going to go from running it locally on our machines like we just did using Sales Lift to a little bit more interaction on to make it sort of a more production ready kind of environment. So we'll run it in production mode locally in our next video, and then we will take that and run it on an EC2 instance in Amazon Web Services. So check out the next video if you want to get your app deployed to the cloud. All right, thanks everyone. See you next time.